السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Firstly, apologies about yesterday. It was about 13 hours. No one in Benoni, actually the area in which I live, had electricity, and it was something which was not planned, so therefore we could not have lessons. Nevertheless, we are discussing the ruling if a narrator is to use the word an when narrating from his sheikh. So, from all that we discussed in the last lesson, it was clear that Imam Bukhārī rahimahullah and Imam Muslim rahimahullah has the same view. So, if they have the same view, then when Imam Muslim rahimahullah is addressing the person who holds an alternate view, then it will be obvious that he is not addressing Imam Bukhārī rahimahullah, because him and Imam Bukhārī have the same view. So Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah wrote a detailed research which is attached to the end of his print of al-Muqidha, and there he proves also that Imam Muslim rahimahullah indeed is not referring to Imam Bukhārī rahimahullah. And here in the footnotes, if you got this print of Shaykh Nuruddin Itr, then you can see he says that وَالَّذِي تَبَيَّنَ لِكَاتِبِ السُّطُورِ بِالْبَحْثِ أن مسلما لا يقصد البخاري في كلامه المشار إليه بل يقصد غيره. He is referring to someone else, he is not referring to Imam Bukhārī rahimahullah. But now Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says that وَأَلْزَمَ الْبُخَارِيَّ بِأَنَّهُ يَحْتَاجُ أَلَّا يَقْبَلَ الْمُعَنْعَنَةَ أَصْلًا. He's saying that Imam Muslim rahimahullah is making it lazim for Imam Bukhārī. He's imposing on Imam Bukhārī that Imam Bukhārī, it would be necessary for him that he cannot accept any narration which is transmitted with the word an. So here when he says Alzam al-Bukhārī, then obviously because we said that Imam Bukhārī has the same view like him, it's obvious that he is not referring to Imam Bukhārī rahimahullah. And this is important because Imam Muslim rahimahullah actually uses really derogatory words on the one who made the statement. And even on the statement itself, he totally discards the statement. So he says, وَقَدْ تَكَلَّمَ بَعْضُ مُنْتَحِلِ الْحَدِيثِ. Muntahil al-hadith means someone who's not a muhaddith, but he acts like he wants to be a muhaddith, but he's not fit to be a muhaddith. Min ahli asrina. So you can see using such a derogatory term. And thereafter he's saying that لو ضربنا عن حكايته وذكر فساده صفحا. So you can see saying that ذكر فساده also he then says إذا الأعراض عن القول المطرح أحرى لإماتته وإخمال ذكر قائله وأجدر ألا يكون ذلك تنبيها للجهال عليه. And like that constantly uses such low words for the person who holds the statement لما تخوفنا من شرور العواقب واخترار الجهلة بمحدثات الأمور. You can see all these kind of really bad words which he used. After that, few pages later, he says وكان هذا القول الذي أحدثه القائل. And when he concludes this whole thing, he says فلا حاجة بنا في رده بأكثر مما شرحنا إذا كان قدر المقالة. That if this is the worth of the statement, وقائلها, and this is the worth of the one who made the statement, then the amount that we have refuted it is enough. So these kind of words he uses. Now, if you take this view which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning here, that Imam Bukhārī rahmallah stipulated liqa, then it would mean that Imam Muslim rahmallah is actually attacking Imam Bukhārī rahmallah. But this here is not possible because we'll give a few reasons later on. So if we have to go back and we have to see where all this actually originated from, that who was the first person to claim that the view of Imam Bukhārī rahmallah differed from Imam Muslim rahmallah, that since Imam Bukhārī rahmallah, he did not clearly mention his view as we said in the last lesson. So then who was the first person to, so to say, accuse him or to mention that he stipulated the condition of liqa? Because in the last lesson we said that Imam Bukhārī did not clearly mention his view, yet Ibn Hajar is mentioning there that قَدْ ثَبَتَ لَهُ لِقَاءُ مَنْ رَوَى عَنْهُ. So who was the first person who said that Imam Bukhari rahmallah stipulates this condition? When we go back to the earlier books, then it seems that the first person was Qadi Ijāzah rahimahullah. Now, Imam Muslim rahimahullah passed away in the year 261 Hijri. And Qadi Ijāzah, he passed away in the year 544 Hijri. So this means that a person who passed away over 280 years, almost 3 centuries after Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he is the first person to mention. So he mentions in Ikmalul Mu'lim, وَالْقَوْلُ الَّذِي رَدَّهُ مُسْلِمٌ وَالَّذِي عَلَيْهِ أَئِمَّةُ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ عَلِيُّ بْنُ الْمَدِينِ وَالْبُخَارِيُّ وَغَيْرُهُمَا. But from here you can see that it's 3 centuries. That means throughout the era of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah and Imam Muslim rahimahullah, no one ever felt that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is using these harsh, that Imam Muslim rahimahullah is using these harsh words against Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So this was during the era. So you will not find anyone coming to Imam Muslim rahimahullah and saying that how could you use such derogatory statements on your own teacher, such a leading muhaddith, such a great scholar? No one ever during his time. Then even after they passed away, none of their students or even the students' students felt that Imam Muslim rahimahullah is referring to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Almost 3 centuries, no one said that Imam Muslim rahimahullah is speaking against Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Then taking it a step further, we find that scholars in this period, they actually continue to support Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So you will find many scholars that how Imam Muslim rahimahullah mentions ijma' on his view, many other scholars will also mention ijma', and they will take this exact same view. So here the Imam Muslim rahimahullah being referring to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, then you would have at least in the, over 280 years, you would have at least had some saying that Imam Muslim mentions this, but the correct view is what Imam Bukhari rahimahullah said. Imam Bukhari was a great muhaddith, and he had to, in our context, to say his diehard followers, those who were extremely loyal to him. Yet, no one, for 280 years, no one said that Imam Muslim is mentioning this, it's weak, and the preferred view is that of Imam Bukhari rahmallah. Then, okay, so we said Qadi Ijāzah rahmallah was the first to make the statement. Then if you have to look, okay, after Qadi Ijāzah, did scholars approve the statement? So we find that there is only one known person between Qadi Ijāzah and Ibn Salah rahmallah who mentioned the same thing, and that is Ibn al-Qattan al-Fasi. Thereafter, Ibn Salah rahmallah mentioned the same view, and from him, most of the commentators of his ulum al-Ḥadīth, so those who wrote the Alfiya or the commentaries on the Alfiya, or who wrote commentaries on the abridgment, those who worked on his Muqaddimah basically, they they took this view, and about 5 others, maybe who didn't have a direct link with Muqaddimah Ibn Salah. But then ultimately, Ibn Hajar rahmallah promoted this view, and from him it became popular because he speaks about it in his commentary of, in the introduction of his commentary to Ṣahīh al-Bukhārī and Hajj al-Sari, likewise in his Nukat, and then you can see he speaks about it here, and therefore it became common that Imam Muslim rahmallah is actually using these derogatory statements against Imam Bukhari rahmallah. But the fact that we mentioned for so long, there were hardly any, there was actually no scholars, and then even after Qadi has mentioned it, there were so few scholars who accepted the view, that is sufficient to show us how weak the view is. So the truth is that Imam Bukhari rahmallah and Imam Muslim rahimahumullah, both of them hold the exact same view, and therefore Imam Muslim rahmallah is not referring to Imam Bukhari rahmallah. But now Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying وَأَلْزَمَ الْبُخَارِيَّ. So we're saying besides this reason that there was 3 centuries and no one said or assumed that Imam Muslim is referring to Imam Bukhari, there are so many other reasons as well. To just mention a few, that Imam Muslim rahmallah mentions that there is ijma' on his view. So if someone as senior as Imam Bukhari rahmallah held a contrary view, then even if he differed or if he regarded it as a weak view, he still cannot claim that there is ijma'. Like for example, in today's time, say for example, you have a view in which you really regard as strong. Like maybe say that you are of the view to say that it's haram to invest on the stock exchange. So you write a whole treatise on your view. You make a detailed tahqiq. So it's fine, but you can't mention the day's ijma' on this view, because there are some scholars who would say, although they have their conditions, this is an example. So like that, you can have your view, but if there are other scholars, then to say that there is ijma' on the view which you are holding, or take photography, for example, you want to write research, so you can't say now that there's ijma' according to all scholars, because there are obviously scholars who regard it as permissible. So even though you have a contrary view, so Imam Muslim rahmallah is claiming that there's ijma', and Imam Bukhari rahmallah held the view. Obviously, if Imam Bukhari held the view, then he wouldn't have been the only person. You can see Qadri has mentioned that even his teacher Ali ibn al-Madini. So there would be many others in his time who would also, or the students of Imam Bukhari rahmallah, those who followed Imam Bukhari rahmallah, they all would have held the same view. And therefore, it would be incorrect to mention that there is ijma'. So the fact that Imam Muslim is mentioning that there is ijma' already shows you that it can be that Imam Bukhari rahmallah held that view. Then, okay, Imam Muslim rahmallah, he started to write his Ṣahīh in the year 235 Hijri. So he was still young at that time, and he wrote the Muqaddimah. There's proof in the Muqaddimah to show that he wrote this Muqaddimah, the introduction, before writing the actual Ṣahīh, in contrast to those who felt that he wrote the introduction after writing the Ṣahīh. So he wrote this Muqaddimah when he was still young. And but it took him 15 years to write his own Ṣahīh, and he completed it in the year 250. In the year 250 Hijri, this is the same year that he now went into the service of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So he went and he stayed with Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. He became close to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. He actually began to honor him so much. In fact, there was another teacher who spoke against Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So Imam Muslim rahimahullah, he picked up his turban and he left, and he abandoned going to that teacher anymore because he spoke against Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. And when mentioning this here, Fazlur Rahman always highlights, he says that, see, they clearly mentioned that he picked up his turban, so it shows you that the muhaddithun of the time would wear turbans. So nevertheless, they would wear imamah. So Imam Muslim rahmallah became so loyal to Imam Bukhari rahmallah, and he respected him. You all know the famous incident that he said, "Da'ni ya ustad al-ustadin," using this kind of high words, "Sayyidul muhaddithin wa tabibul hadith fi ilali hatta uqabbila rijlayk." He was even prepared to kiss the feet of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So now you tell me that if he's using such words to say muntahil al-hadith, and he's actually clearly mentioning that the person who held that view is not a muhaddith, and here he's calling Imam Bukhari Sayyidul Muhaddithin, and he's showing him this, and actually he's even giving him all his time. After him already is such a great scholar. That one is in your youth, when you're still young, when it's the time of studying, and here he already has his own students. He already finished, completed with his whole Ṣahīh. Yet he's dedicating his time and he's going and he's staying with Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So constantly he's praising him, he's holding him in such high esteem. So even, okay, we say that even if you want to assume that maybe before that when he wrote this view, he didn't know that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is the one. This here is which some scholars have tried to give. Ibn Rushd tried to say this here, that maybe Imam Muslim wrote this. There was a view which he heard of, but he didn't know who held that view, and therefore he used this kind of derogatory terms. So, but definitely when he stayed with Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, when they would talk, what they would talk, they wouldn't talk about the weather and things like that. They would talk about Ḥadīth. So this full 5 years, it was like became so attached to Imam Bukhari, and so much time he discussed. In fact, there is proof that he even, this whole incident which you're mentioning about when he wanted to kiss the feet of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, immediately after that, he asked Imam Bukhari rahimahullah exactly the same the question on the same masala, and Imam Bukhari rahimahullah responded to that, and then after that he still praised Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So that is enough to show that obviously if he used these kind of derogatory words, then, and now when he came to Imam Bukhari, if he did not know it was his view, he would have maybe edited his Ṣahīh, he would have maybe at least mentioned that Imam Bukhari holds this view, but the proof that he still kept all of this, it shows that he's not referring to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Then we say, okay, maybe during the 5 years he was too busy in the company of Imam Bukhari, so he didn't get the time. We say, okay, after these 5 years, he still lived for a full 6 years thereafter, because we said he passed away in the year 261, so he could have edited his introduction then, but still he did not. And then no one ever came to him and told him that, look, you are like a hypocrite, na'udhu billah. That on the one hand you are referring to him here like such a great muhaddis, but then in your kitabs you are writing against him. No one ever came and done that. And then we say that so during their lifetime, no one came and no one felt that he's addressing Imam Bukhari. And then after him, we find, like I told you earlier, that there were so many scholars: Imam Hakim rahimahullah, Imam Bayhaqi rahimahullah, Imam Darqutni, Khatib al-Baghdadi, Abu al-Hasan al-Qabisi, Abu Amr al-Dani. All of them, they also, number one, followed Imam Muslim rahimahullah, and most of them even claimed that there is ijma' on this view. So had it been that they felt Imam Bukhari rahimahullah had a contrary view, then they wouldn't have claimed that there's ijma', because like I said, that even if one scholar has to mention a contrary view, then you can't say that there's ijma'. So even no matter how weak you feel the opposite view is, but the fact that you feel that there are others who hold an alternate view, you can't claim that there is ijma'. So these are just a few proofs to show that Imam Muslim rahimahullah is not referring to Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, rather he is referring to someone else. And in fact, he's not even referring to the teacher of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, Ali bin Madini, like Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghadda rahimahullah tried to say. He's definitely referring to someone else. That's not the time to discuss how he's not referring to Ali bin Madini, because it's not regarding that. But there are enough evidences that Ali bin Madini rahimahullah also held the same view, like Imam Muslim rahimahullah. So this statement here, or these words, were Alzam al-Bukhārī, which Ibn Hajar rahimahullah mentioned, is not correct. And then even mentioning this whole statement here is completely out of place. And therefore we won't go into too much detail, just to give a very brief explanation. So Ibn Hajar is saying, وَمَا أَلْزَمَهُ بِهِ لَيْسَ بِلَازِمٍ لأن الراوي إذا ثبت له اللقاء مرة لا يجري في رواياته احتمال أن لا يكون سمعه لأنه يلزم من جريانه أن يكون مدلسا والمسألة مفروضة في غير المدلس. So he's saying that that's what he's trying to accuse Imam Bukhari rahmallah of. It will not apply. Why? Because what he's trying to say. So let's first look at the exact words of Imam Muslim rahmallah. Imam Muslim rahmallah in his introduction is saying that فإن كانت العلة في تضعيفك الخبر وتركك الاحتجاج بإمكان الإرسال فيه لزمك ألا تثبت إسنادا معنعنا حتى ترى فيه السماع من أوله إلى آخره. This is what he's saying. So he's saying that if you want to be so strict and you want to be so harsh, and you want to apply this kind of stringency in establishing that the narrator had to meet the person, then only he can use the word an. Then even if he did meet him, what proof you got that it was in that meeting that he heard the specific narration which he is narrating with an? It could be that he met him and maybe he did not hear any hadith from him, or maybe he heard just one other narration. So this narration here, he's still narrating it in spite of not hearing it directly, and he's using the word an. So basically he's trying to say that your stringency, your strictness has no benefit. If you really want to be so difficult, then he's saying you cannot accept a mu'an narration at all unless there are clear words of sama'. He's saying that any narration which is narrated with an has this great doubt that the person is, so to say, the narrator is deceiving you. He didn't hear directly from the teacher, but he's making it seem like he heard from the teacher. So if you are going to then negate mu'anna narrations, it's going to ultimately lead to discarding majority of the ahadith, because those of you who read books of ahadith, you know that so many ahadith, the word an is used. So since Ibn Hajar rahmallah here then thought that he is referring to Imam Bukhari rahmallah, he answered this objection here by saying that everybody knows that one of the most important conditions and the first and primary condition of accepting a mu'an'an narration is that the narrator should not be a mudallis. So we'll inshallah do the chapter about the tadlis and a mudallis narrator in more detail. But for now, to explain who a mudallis is, Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah says, وهو من يروي الحديث عن معاصره وملاقيه والحال أنه ليس له سماع عنه. That a person, he narrates from people of his same era with words which makes it seem as if he heard those if he heard that narration directly from that particular sheikh, but in reality he did not hear it directly. So he's trying to give the impression that he's a student of such a great scholar in his era, and he heard this type of narrations from him, but the reality is that he's not. So mudallis is basically trying to deceive. So if you know that a person is a mudallis, and then he's using the word an, everyone agrees that you will have to reject that narration. Imam Bukhari also, Imam Muslim, there's basically like ittifaq on it, because he's trying to deceive you. So therefore you cannot accept those kind of narrations. So that's what Ibn Hajar rahmallah is saying. He's saying يَلْزَمُ مِنْ جِرْيَانِ أَن يَكُونَ مُدَلِّسًا, that if you are going to say, if you are putting this kind of an accusation, then it's going to actually take it to another level, because then it means anyone narrating with the word an is going to become a mudallis. And he's saying that neither Imam Bukhari rahmallah nor would Imam Muslim rahmallah grade such a narrator as a mudallis. So Imam Muslim rahmallah and Imam Bukhari rahmallah, according to his correct view, they can say the exact same. They can make this exact same claim, and they can say that when a person is narrating from someone else who is in the same era, and it was impossible for them to meet, and there is no clear proof. Because remember, we mentioned that these are three vital, three crucial, three important conditions which Imam Muslim rahmallah put, which many scholars from the past have not mentioned. And Sheikh Awama Hafizahullah, he mentions that it is essential to mention. He said, وَهُوَ اِقْتِضَاءُ الْمَحَلِ, that it is essential when mentioning the view of Imam Muslim. If anyone mentions, so there are very senior scholars of the past who mentioned the view of Imam Muslim as only mu'asara, but he's saying that that would be incorrect, because these two additional conditions are vital. So nevertheless, here on this first quality, which of a Ṣahīh Ḥadīth, Ibn Hajar, remember where all this is, that Ibn Hajar is trying to show that on each of the 5 qualities of a Ṣahīh narration, Imam Ṣahīh al-Bukhārī excels. So we say that, yes, Imam Ṣahīh al-Bukhārī does excel, but now you don't have to go to this kind of a level. You basically don't have to make the takalluf in trying to show that Ṣahīh al-Bukhārī has merit over Ṣahīh Muslim. So on this first quality of ittisal, you can't really use this here as a proof, because it is misquoting the view of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahullah. Now looking at another 2 qualities, so Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, وَأَمَّا رُجْحَانُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ الْعَدَالَةُ وَالضَّبْطُ. So your homework is, you must find how come that after haythu you're saying adalatu and you're not reading of as min haythu al-adalati wa dhabti. So he says, فَلِأَنَّ الرِّجَالَ الَّذِينَ تُكُلِّمَ فِيهِمْ مِنْ رِجَالِ مُسْلِمْ أَكْثَرُ عَدَدًا مِنَ الرِّجَالِ الَّذِينَ تُكُلِّمَ فِيهِمْ مِنْ رِجَالِ الْبُخَارِ. He's saying that the amount of mutakallam fi narrators who have been criticized in Ṣahīh al-Bukhārī are much more than the amount of narrators who have been criticized in Ṣahīh Muslim. So in Ḥadīth Sari, he mentions وَبَيَانَ ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَوْجُهٍ أَحَدُهَا. And here you can see how when we're reading Nuzha an-Naḍar, then you always refer to Ḥadīth Sari also and to Nukat. So this is how you read the books of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. So here in Ḥadīth Sari, he's saying وَبِيَانَ ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَوْجُهٍ, because there are 3 books which are revolving around the same topics. So those topics which are covered in Ḥadīth Sari, then when looking at Nuzha an-Naḍar, you also refer. So here he just mentioned it like this. The explanation for it in Ḥadīth Sari, he mentions أَنَّ الَّذِينَ انْفَرَدَ الْبُخَارِ بِالْإِخْرَاجِ لَهُمْ دُونَ مُسْلِمْ 430. So this is what he says, that there are 430 odd narrators, بِضْعُ وَثَلَاثُونَ. So here he mentions it with the word بِضْعُ وَثَلَاثُونَ. So but keep in mind the word bidh and keep in mind the word salasun. So in his Nukat he mentions on page 138, أن الذين انفرد البخاري بالإخراج لهم دون مسلم 435. So he's mentioning 435 narrators. But this is what he mentions. If you have to look, Ibn Salah rahmallah in his Siyana Ṣahīh Muslim, he's saying there قرأت بخط الحاكم أبي عبد الله الحافظ في كتاب المدخل إلى معرفة المستدرك أن عدد من أخرج لهم البخاري في الجامع الصحيح ولم يخرج له مسلم 434 شيخا. So you can see he's mentioning 434. This is one less than what Ibn Hajar mentioned. Ibn Hajar mentioned in his Nukat 435. Here he's mentioning, Ibn Salah is quoting Imam Hakim rahmallah, is saying 434. And then Imam Nawawi rahmallah, he also mentioned 434, and many other scholars mentioned 434. But Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentions 435. Now if you got this print of Nuzha an-Naḍar, like which I have, the third print, then if you look in the ta'liq, there on the footnote number 3, you'll see he's saying that Rijal al-Bukhārī 480 rajulan. So he's saying 400 over 480 basically. So here this Thamanun, if any of you are using a later version, or if you have a later version of Nuzha an-Naḍar, then you can see maybe where the Shaykh Nuruddin rahmallah, if he corrected it. But it seems that here it's a typo, because the amount of narrators who have been criticized from this 434, 435 are 80. So maybe here, Thalathun Thamanun, you can see it's even written very similarly. So maybe this here will be in error. But the correct is 434 or 435. So there are 434, 435 narrators based on these two views which we mentioned, and from them there are 18 narrators who have been criticized. So that's about 18%, 19% of narrators. This is the amount of narrators who have been criticized in Sahih al-Bukhārī, between 18 to 19%. Whereas Imam Muslim rahimahullah, so again here with regards to his view, that you have some who are saying 620 and some who are saying 625 narrators. So between 620 to 625 narrators, there are about 160 who have been said to be weak. So that's about 26% of his narrators. So already that shows you the difference, that he has 7% more narrators who have been criticized compared to Sahih al-Bukhārī. Now you might wonder that until now you always knew that, and even in fact you even call it Sahih al-Bukhārī and Sahih Muslim, so you always knew that these kitabs are Sahih, but they are such a large amount. You can see Imam Bukhārī close to 1/5, Imam Muslim over quarter the amount of his narrators have been weakened. So what would that mean? So here Ibn Salah rahimahullah, and it is important to answer this here, because this year those who reject Sahih al-Bukhārī and Sahih Muslim, they use this as evidence. They use this as evidence to prove that, and then those who obviously reject Ḥadīth entirely, they then exploit this here. That they say, look, you are regarding Sahih al-Bukhārī to be so authentic, yet there are so many narrators who have been criticized. So Ibn Salah rahimahullah, he gave a few responses in his commentary, which he started to write on Sahih Muslim, but then he unfortunately could not complete Sahih Muslim. So he mentions there al-Fasl al-Thamin. He says that Aba'a ibn Muslimin bi riwayatihi fi sahihihi an jama'atin min al-du'afa aw al-mutawassitin al-waqi'in fi al-tabaqati al-thaniyah. So he's mentioning that people have criticized Imam Muslim for mentioning, for narrating from this kind of narrators. So he gives a few answers. The first answer, he says that يكون ذلك في من هو ضعيف عند غيره ثقة عنده. That there is a difference of opinion regarding a particular narrator. Others might have felt that he is weak, but Imam Muslim, but you can also add Imam Bukhari, so the answer becomes for both of them. They felt that he was reliable, and obviously they were mujtahidun. So they were entitled to make their own research and then have their own opinion. So if they felt that the narrator is reliable, then you can't criticize them for narrating from a particular narrator. So Imam Nawawi rahmallah, he mentions at one place in his commentary of Sahih Muslim, actually right in the beginning, وَأَمَّا قَوْلُ مُسْلِمْ رَحْمَ اللَّهِ فِي صَحِيحِ فِي بَابِ صِفَةِ صَلَاةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم ليس كل شيء صحيح عندي وضعتها هنا، يعني في كتابه هذا الصحيح، وإنما وضعت هنا ما أجمع عليه، فمشكل فقد وضع في كتابه فيه أحاديث كثيرة مختلفة في صحتها لكونها من حديث من ذكرناه ومن لم يذكره ممن اختلفوا في صحة حديثه. So then it says that وجوابه من وجهين أحدهما أن مراده أنه لم يضع فيه إلا ما وجد عنده فيه شروط الصحيح المجمع عليه. He's saying that according to him it was authentic, so therefore he narrated it. So that's the first answer. The second answer which Ibn Salah rahimahullah presents, يكون ذلك واقعا في الشواهد والمتابعات لا في الأصول. He's saying that here he brings it as support. So he mentions a authentic hadith, and then to give support to that authentic hadith. Maybe at times, not to give support, maybe the authentic narration has the word an, and maybe people in his or scholars of hadith in his region or in his time, they felt that particular narrator did not hear from the sheikh. So maybe with a weak chain of transmission, he has proof that he actually used there the word sami'tu or haddathani or akhbarani. So therefore he then brings it to just support that authentic chain of transmission. So here Allama Zayla'i rahmallah in Nasb al-Raya, he says that in volume 1 page 341 342 ولكن صاحبا الصحيح إذا أخرج لمن تكلم فيه فإنهم ينتقون من حديثه ما توبع عليه. They choose those kind of narrations. وظهرت شواهده وعلم أن له أصلا, because Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim are already mentioning the authentic narration. So that shows that weak narration has the mutaba'ah. So even though that weak narration it's weak, but looking at the authentic narration which they are narrating, it already strengthens that weak narration. But nevertheless, Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, when they bring in that weak narration, they just bring in it for support. Then a third reason which he gives is that maybe that particular narrator began to lose his memory in old age. So while he was young, he had a good memory. And this here happens very often. In fact, it happens to majority of the people. When they become old, they start to lose their memory. So Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim would narrate, and it would be very specific to choose those narrations which he narrated in his prime, when he was young, before he could lose his memory. So Ibn Salah rahmallah says, look, for example, Ahmad bin Abdurrahman bin Wahab, that Imam Muslim rahimahullah narrated from him. But what we said, Imam Muslim wrote his kitab between the year 235 to 250. Whereas it's proven that Ahmad bin Abdurrahman, he only started to lose his memory after the year 250. So it shows when Imam Muslim was narrating from him, now you can say that he's a weak narrator because he started to lose, or you can call him mukhtalat or whatever. But at the time when Imam Muslim narrated from him, he still had a good memory. And another reason is that maybe at times Imam Bukhari and Imam or Imam Muslim, they would have a narration which is narrated with by a reliable person with a longer chain of transmission. Maybe between them and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam there were 6 narrators. But then with a slightly weaker person, they would have it with maybe 4 people between them and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So with a shorter sanad. So obviously, and we'll do the whole chapter of Ali and Nazil later on in the kitab. But it was a great thing in those times to have a shorter sanad. So therefore they would narrate the weaker chain of transmission just because it was shorter, and they wouldn't then clearly narrate the longer chain of transmission with the thicker rawi, because they knew that everyone in their time knew about that. And this here is proven from an incident when someone came and informed Imam Muslim rahimahullah that Abu Zur'a al-Razi is displeased with him narrating from narrators like Asbab bin Nasr and Qutb bin Nasir and Ahmad bin Isa al-Misri. So Imam Muslim rahimahullah responded and said that إنما قلت صحيح وإنما أرسلت من حديث أسباط وقطن أحمد ما قد رواه الثقات عن شيوخهم إلا أنه ربما وقع عنهم بارتفاع, a longer chain of transmission, ويكون عندي من رواية أوثق منهم بنزول. And he's saying that I do have it from other narrators as well. So after mentioning these 4 reasons, then this here is just in passing to say it. It's a Sunday morning here, and I'm sure for all of you, I don't think any of you could be busy, but so we can go a little bit extra time. Nevertheless, Ibn Salah rahmallah mentions one important point, and he says, وَفِيمَا ذَكَرْتُهُ دَلِيلٌ عَلَى أَنَّ مَنْ حَكَمَ لِشَخْصٍ بِمُجَرَّدِ رِوَايَةِ مُسْلِمٍ عَنْهُ فِي صَحِيحِهِ بِأَنَّهُ مِنْ شَرْطِ الصِّحَّةِ عِنْدَ مُسْلِمٍ فَقَدْ غَفَلَ وَأَخْطَأَ. He's saying that if you open Sahih Muslim and you find that Imam Muslim is narrating from a particular narrator, and you feel that Imam Muslim rahmallah, you regard him as a narrator from Imam Muslim rahmallah, then you are making a mistake. If I could remind me, is that Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda rahimahullah, so in his al-Ajwibat al-Fadila in the Ta'liqat, he made tahqiq of al-Ajwibat al-Fadila. So on page 81, he mentions that one of the problems that Imam Hakim rahimahullah wrote al-Mustadrak. Mustadrak, it means that he wrote those narrations which, according to him, he felt fulfills the conditions of Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, but Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim did not mention it. So he mentions there, وَرُبَمَا جَاءَ إِلَى حَدِيثٍ فِيهِ رَجُلٌ قَدْ أَخْرَجَ لَهُ صَاحِبَ الصَّحِيحِ عَنْ شَيْخٍ مُعَيَّنٍ لضبط حديثه وخصوصيته به ولم يخرج حديثه عن غيره لضعفه فيه أو لعدم ضبط حديثه أو لكونه غير مشهور بالرواية عنه أو لغير ذلك فيخرجه عن غير ذلك الشيخ. And so then Imam Hakim would see, just because Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim. So basically, you have to see how Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahmullah narrated. That they are basically one of five, or if you want to call it six, if you put mutabat and shawahid into one category or two categories. There are six different ways if they narrated from them. You cannot really say that Imam Bukhari or to refer to them as a narrator of Bukhari and Muslim. The first, if they are bringing it as mutaba'at. Second, if they are bringing it as shawahid. Third, if they are bringing it mu'allaqan. Fourth, if they are bringing it maqrunan bighayrihi. Fifth, if they are bringing it as specifically from a particular sheikh. And the sixth is before memory lost. And you cannot say that they are regarding it as, you cannot regard it as a narrator of Bukhari and Muslim, because they narrated from him in a specific way. So now if you go and take his narrations in other ways, then you cannot then say that it's a person who fulfills the condition of Bukhari and Muslim. So from all of this here, you can see that even though there were weak narrators or narrators who were said to be weak, the way that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahullah narrated from them would not really have an impact on the authenticity of the narration which they are narrating. And therefore, actually, Abu al-Hasan al-Maqdisi would say that when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is narrated from a particular narrator, then understand that هذا قد حاز القنطرة, that this person now crossed the bridge. All boxes have been ticked. So even though others might regard him as weak, but you need to know that a thorough investigation was made, full research was done, lots of thought was given, and in fact even istikhara was made. So if you find any accusations upon that particular rawi, then just ignore those. Like if you have to look actually, one narrator, Hamran bin Aban, so Imam Bukhari rahmallah narrated about, if I remember correctly, I think 8 narrations from him. So the reason why he was weakened, Ibn Sa'ad rahmallah, he said, كان كثير الحديث ولم أرهم يحتجون به, using these words to weaken him. So if you, the reason why he's being weakened is not even known. So others had a great regard for him. Yahya bin Ma'in acknowledged that he was a muhaddith of Medina. So like I always say, that one is you be a muhaddith of an area. Now in today's time, like you go in a place where there's hardly any Muslims, and you study 1-2 years, you can be called the Imam, you can be called a muhaddith. So read one kitab of hadith. Obviously, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed is the king. But one is in the time of tabi'een, in the glorious era when there are so many masters of hadith, and then for someone to call you a muhaddith, then that really means that you are a master in hadith. So Yahya bin Ma'in regarded him and called him a muhaddith of Medina. And likewise, Ibn Hibban rahmallah and others, they also graded him as reliable. So you can see that there is no problem with Imam Bukhari rahmallah narrating from him. Then, now just to complete this point here, like I say, that I don't think any of you should be busy, but if you're busy, then you can listen to the recording. So he says, مع أن البخاري لم يكثر من إخراج حديثهم. That Imam Bukhari rahmallah, okay, would narrate from these kind of narrators, but he wouldn't narrate a lot from them. So if you have to look, that from these 80 weak narrators, from Asid bin Zayd, Imam Bukhari only narrates from him once. From Bishr bin Sirri, Imam Bukhari narrates from him once. From Thabit bin Muhammad, Imam Bukhari narrates 4 narrations from him. From Thawr bin Yazid, he narrates 5 narrations. From Hassan bin Ibrahim, he narrates about 4 narrations from him. From Hassan bin Bishr, he narrates 2 narrations. Like that. So you can see Khalid bin Sa'ad, he only narrates 1 narration. Yes, you do have those odd rawis who he narrated like a lot. For example, Asim bin Sulaiman al-Ahwal, he narrated 56 narrations from him. Or if you have to look, so you have narrators like that where he narrated a lot. Sa'id bin Abi Aruba, he narrated 58 narrations from him. But from majority of them, he would narrate very few narrations. So this is the first condition, reason what Ibn Hajar rahmallah is given, that Imam Muslim would narrate a lot from these kind of mutakallam fi, even though the preferred view is that they are not weak, but Imam Bukhari would still take this extra caution and would narrate very few narrations from them. That's the one thing. Then the second thing is saying, بَلْ غَالِبُهُمْ مِنْ شُيُوخِهِ الَّذِينَ أَخَذَ عَنْهُمْ وَمَارَسَ حَدِيثَهُم. He's saying that a majority of them are even from the shuyukh of Imam Bukhari. So Imam Bukhari, obviously when a person who's your sheikh, a person who's, you stay in their company, you can see their lives, they're like an open book in front of you. And وَمَارَسَ حَدِيثَهُم. So firstly, he knew that the weakness upon these narrators are not so severe, but it's not a reason for me to omit their narrations. This is in contrast to Imam Muslim, because Imam Muslim, rahmallah, he would narrate from much earlier scholars. So when you are narrating from earlier scholars, you are not personally witnessing their condition. Rather, you are relying on what others have told you about that person. But when you go and personally met with the person, then that will obviously mean that you know a bit more about that particular person. So on these two conditions, Imam Ibn Hajar is saying, look, that Imam Bukhari, he is preferred and he is more stringent than Imam Muslim, and therefore you would have to give preference to Bukhari and Muslim. So in contrast to the first one of Ittisal, here Imam Ibn Hajar actually makes a valid point. And yes, definitely the narrators, when looking at the narrators, the quality of the narrators, and there's much more, obviously we are not now going to go into all of those details. When you divide narrators into 5 categories, then Imam Bukhari only narrating from the first, whereas Imam Muslim going all the way till the 3rd category, etc. But the quality of narrators in Bukhari are definitely much better than the quality of narrators in Sahih Muslim, and therefore the point which Imam Ibn Hajar makes here is valid. Inshallah, we'll continue now with the next 2 conditions in the next lesson. Until then, Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.